All right. Hey, everybody. So, super excited to welcome you to this executive panel session from SciCode, based on the authors of our most recent book that we published called Code Resilience in the Age of ASPM. So, this session is extremely unique because we're going to hit a bit deeper on some of the topics from the authors in the book. And so, welcome to everyone who's joining us for the first time. And if you haven't downloaded a copy of the book, please go ahead and directly do that on scicode.com. If you go to the top banner there, you can get that. I'm Amir Kazemi, Director of Product Marketing here at SciCode. Super excited for this panel discussion and joined by this esteemed panel of executives here. So before we dive in on some of these topics, let's go around the room and do maybe a quick 30 to 60-second intro across the panel. Roland, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Mayor, thanks for having me. This book was really fun, and looking forward to diving into it a little deeper. Hi, everyone. Roland Cludier. I'm a Chief Security Officer. Been Chief Security Officer for TikTok and ByteDance, ADP, EMC, and others. Currently a board member and advisor for other Chief Security Officers in the industry. And digital defense and enablement is kind of my passion. And this book was really interesting because of the level that we're going to take it down and being able to protect the business today into the code. So looking forward to the chat.
Thanks, Roland. I'll just go in order of who I see on my screen here. So Justin, you're up next.
Certainly, thank you. Justin Semany, currently a partner at YL Ventures, where we solely focus on cybersecurity innovation for the US as well as Israel. Prior to that, I spent 30 years in the security industry, not unlike Roland, but I left recently as the CSO of Unity, and then SAP, Yahoo, Symantec, and a bunch of other places before that. So really excited to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. Thanks, Justin. James.
Hello, I'm James. I have the least executive prestige of anyone here, but I am the founder of Latio Tech, and the goal of Latio is to bring practitioner guidance to security solutions, and ASPM is a great way to explore what that means for practitioners. So happy to be here and help learn with everyone. So.
Awesome. Great to have you, James. And then Helen.
Hi, everybody. Helen Patton, ex-CISO. Now I'm a cybersecurity advisor at Cisco. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Helen. And last but not least, of course, VJ.
Hey folks, BJ LaRosa. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Cisco's Meraki business unit. I've been in the industry for about 28 years now, and worked with Roland at a bunch of companies: EMC, RSA, ADP, TikTok. Been focused on trust and quality assurance for a long time in terms of building products and cloud and driving cybersecurity as a core component of the business for these different companies.
Amazing. Thanks, VJ. So wanted to kind of dive into some of the topics into the book. The first few were kind of around the shifting threat landscape, as well as the impact of AI. So digital transformation has really changed the world over the last decade or even more than a decade now. So we almost consider it old news and everything is, kind of made of code, right? Um, how has security adapted to take on the challenge of securing our digital enterprises today? Roland, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, it's a great question because at times I think it's really slowly crept up on us and how we've matured our security programs, organizations, our capabilities to deliver this business operations protection view. And other times I think it has come over, night, like immediately, and all of a sudden we've really had to change. I think of it in kind of three major areas. First is this end-to-end assured protection operations. So when we used to think about the digital infrastructure that made our businesses run, that was one thing. But now, as we start to go from code to cloud, and everything in between, software, architecture, operations, I mean, even some business imperative operations that aren't core to technology, are are some of the things that we're being involved in to ensure that there's this end-to-end thread of consistency of trust and protective disciplines, which has led to theme number two, which is the extended to non-traditional discipline areas. I think, folks, Justin and I have been doing this for more than a couple of years. Um, Many security organizations now take this holistic operational view, adding intelligence. I mean, true intelligence operations, over the horizon threat management, internally and externally to their organization, business resiliency functions inclusive of BIA, BCP, DR, crisis management as a core discipline within the organizations, and other functions to provide this true defensive operational portfolio, again, from the time that a product is thought of and developed to the time it's delivered to market and all the technology in between. That is their digital business. And I think the last area is our people, and our discipline is changing, right? Where our practitioners, these men and women are coming out of university or out of government or military with amazing skills, deeper into analytics, deeper into code and development. We're hiring business and data science capable individuals to help bolster our capabilities within the business process itself and understand what's going on. And we're developing and bringing a lot of the skills necessary to support a changing digitization of the companies or agencies we're protecting. So it's really about the breadth, the depth, and the people.
Hmm. Yeah, no, thanks, Roland. I kind of want to get into now a little bit on the AI side of things. Coming next is AI-driven explosion of code. And, some would argue actually we're already in this AI-driven explosion of code. So I think I was reading a study that said 93 billion lines of code are created every single year in the wild, and that number is increasing year over year. So how are we going to build code resilience, controls, defenses with the acceleration we'll see with this AI-generated code? Vijay, you want to touch on that one for us?
Yeah, it's something I've been putting a lot of thought into lately, and this old joke about walking into a bar always comes to my mind. It goes something like this: a group of 21-year-old programmers and an LLM walk into a bar. The lead programmer says to the bartender, "We'll have a round of 24 tequila shots." The bartender looks at the AI LLM and says, "What would you like to drink?" And the AI LLM says to the bartender, "I'll have what they're having, 24 shots of tequila, please." The reality is, these LLMs, they're, all this AI generated code, it's watching, it's learning from us, right? If we make mistakes, they make mistakes. It doesn't matter if it's, GitHub or, Code Whisperer or you name it, right? Any sort of black box AI code generation, auto generated code just can't be blindly trusted, right? And it still requires the same security reviews
Mhm.
that need to be done for human written code to make sure that we're not introducing software vulnerabilities. And in fact, I actually say it requires even more in-depth reviews to ensure that it can be trusted for quite some time. And the reality is, I don't think that AI generated code honestly is a massive paradigm shift in terms of what's going to be produced. Granted, we can move faster, we can generate more things faster, honestly, I think integrating your core tools for things like SAST and DAST and secrets management or config management, it's even more important now than ever if you're going to start trusting something that's just learning from other examples on how to write code. The answer is going to be the same as trying to drink 24 shots of tequila, right? If you don't, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? You've got to go build in the guardrails, the controls, the capabilities. We can't just trust that these tools are going to produce high quality code. It's got a long way to go still. So we've got to continue to double down on the tools, the technology, the techniques that we use today in how we monitor all of the application security content configurations that are being produced.
Yeah, no, thanks, Vijay, and thanks for that simplified, funny analogy for us there. Um, I want to kind of stay on this topic here a little bit. AI generated code is also creating faster innovation, shortening the development life cycle
Mhm.
uh, for developers. So I think Justin, you mentioned in the book as well that engineers are saving up to 20, 25%, or even more in coding time using AI tools. Um, are we also speeding up the creation of insecure code because of that?
That's a great question. And that data point came from probably like 7, 8 months ago, when GitHub Copilots came out, and I was sitting at Unity, and we saw in practice what the engineers were saving as they were leveraging GitHub Copilot. The question in regards to, are we just creating more garbage faster, is, I think, a fair question. Putting it in context, I think there's two different components of engineering that happens. How do I take open source and integrate it to whatever project that I'm working on? And then the second one is, how do I create new capabilities whole cloth?
Mm-hmm.
In most of applications nowadays, SaaS-based services are probably 60, 70, maybe even 80% open source components that are stitched together for that overlying service. And so there's a lot of, how do I take open source and integrate it correctly for whatever it is I'm building? In that category, I think the reusability of those integration components is probably a lot easier and a lot safer with an AI. How do I create a whole cloth new capability might be a different question altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Where, I mean, let's be honest, secure coding is not necessarily the bastion of a hygiene and great security practices for a very long time. It still maintains the number one problem that we have in industry, and is a very difficult problem to solve. And so when you're taking code that has, to BJ's point, if you take code that has been used in other places that is bad, and you just duplicate it
Yeah.
in your system, you're just spreading the problem around. The real question is, if we're going to use copilots, how have they put in guardrails to ensure the OWASP top 10, input validation, the basic hygiene that we expect prior to it replicating out? I'm not sure what that answer is, to be quite honest. And so the onus, again, to all of us here, is we need to implement those mechanisms, not just because we need to do it for all of our code, but just because the engineers are not looking necessarily at the code that's being produced to them for reusability. They're just making sure that it works and then moving on, not necessarily making sure it works securely.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Have you been seeing or noticing some of these like GitHub co-pilots of the world implementing some of these guardrails from a security perspective, or are we still early on that?
Oh, well, I think we have two problems. One, it's
Yeah,
very early, and two,
yeah,
it's moving very, very fast. And so the
sure.
maturity of the LLMs, let's remove AI out of it and really just focus on the LLM component of AI. I think that is in the first, the epoch of maturity, and it probably will last, for another 4 or 5 years, to
Yeah.
be quite honest. The second part of that is, uh, do I know deeply about GitHub security capabilities behind the scenes? Sadly, I do not. I do know they have had a proactive stance on building out security means and methods within the overall platform. And so
Hmm.
that does give me comfort that it's top of mind. But in reality, what's implemented, uh, I don't know the true answer to that.
Gotcha. No, thank you. Yeah, so continuing on this AI topic, so it's a force for good, it's a force for bad. We can benefit from it. Should we go deeper as an industry in terms of using AI in products and in developing applications using Gen AI? Helen would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I spend a lot of time talking to public sector organizations, so federal, state government, local government. Um, and it's an interesting thing for them too, because there's certainly a recognition that the benefits of AI can be great, right? We can get services to our citizens faster. We can, solve world hunger. Literally, we can do all of the things. Um, the challenge at the moment is that there's these. If you think about responsible AI and the principles of responsible AI, there are trade-offs. And right now, the trade-offs are in favor of functionality, but not in favor of things like transparency or privacy or ethical use of AI, even right now. So what I'm seeing at the at that public sector level is they're willing to experiment with AI for things that are not involving people directly. So they're using AI for things like predicting where you might need to do road maintenance, for example. But they're really leery about using AI solutions to do things like health and human services functions,
Hmm.
for example, because right now the upside pieces of responsible AI are not solid. Now that'll change over time. So I think the opportunity for us as an industry is to make sure one side doesn't get left behind in favor of another. So let's certainly fail fast and forward, but that failure has to also include all the principle side of the AI world as well. And we haven't even got agreement as a society of what those principles really should be. So
Yeah,
we're going to have to tippy toe our way through those problems for a little while yet.
that's super interesting. Do you think a lot of that change or those principles are going to be coming from executives like yourself or, vendors in the industry or maybe all of the
No,
above?
I think it's going to come from customers. I think we will do this fail fast thing, and someone's
Right.
going to get hurt, and then we're going to see a sort of a consumer backlash reaction to things, which will become a policy backlash reaction to things, as is always the case, right?
Hmm.
So the challenge for us in the engineering side is to make sure that those failures aren't catastrophic. And this is what we see in cybersecurity writ large, right? We got to a point where ransomware wasn't just computers failed, but people died, right?
Hmm.
We've been there for a while. We've all seen it, we've all known it. But it's only right now that consumers are like, oh, when ransomware happens and surgeries are in process and people die, that's a problem. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a cybersecurity problem. Oh, so we're going to deal with the same thing with AI and any other new technological sort of thing that advancement that comes along. The thing that I think personally I worry about with AI is the blast radius of AI has the potential to be so much bigger than
Hmm.
and Gen AI. Not I know there's variations of AI, but the ability to get it catastrophically wrong in using generative AI is way higher than what we've dealt with in the past. So those guardrails have to be pretty strong.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's an interesting point around the blast radius. I kind of want to expand on that a little bit here. So, putting ourselves in kind of the shoes of our attackers. So, James, maybe you can touch on this one. How do you think AI is changing the way attackers find and exploit vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I really view it fundamentally what's happening right now is like up leveling the script kiddie level attack that affects like all businesses where you just have this thing open to the internet. Those web crawlers, sort of automated exploits that are out there are going to get a lot better. Because now if I'm an attacker, I'm just experimenting with bug bounties, I'm just playing around. Like I'm going to use ChatGPT as like my pen test buddy and ask it to like interpret results. Like, oh, I'm getting this result. How should I exploit this? And it really allows everyone to get access to the skills that are usually a little more niche. So one example of this is things like buffer overflow attacks that are very like they're in a class of their own in terms of like level of nerdiness and sophistication that an attacker has to have to be able to do advanced exploits like that. But now it's a lot easier for anyone to sort of mess with it and to get their hands dirty with it. And so I think it really, more than anything, raises the baseline level of attacker sophistication that we're able to see. And a easy example of that as well is like a phishing email, right? It's just the same thing applied to code where uh, it used to be a good barrier to entry that like a lot of phishing emails had bad English or misspellings or whatever. But now with Gen AI, like you can't rely on those sort of basic low hanging fruits anymore as your protection. But the sophisticated people, I don't think are going to use it too much because they already know how to do all the stuff, and so they don't need to have like an AI assistant on their pen test adventure. But I think it really just ups the the game as far as the baseline detections that we need to have across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. Um, I kind of want to also touch on what security leaders should be considering in terms of guardrails. Justin, we kind of touched on this around guardrails with tools like GitHub Copilot,
Hmm.
but what about, in general, like what type of guardrails should we be creating around code creation in that process, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little bit silly, but I think the basics matter here. The first
Mhm.
one is ownership, asset management and ownership, from code repositories to what is placed in production. You know, do we have a good handle on all code, repos, and then components within those repos? Who are the owners in the engineering team? How does it chain up organizationally? And which of the code components or repos are actually deployed into production?
Mhm.
I've been in environments where 15,000 code repos and 154 languages is what we had. I can guarantee you that was not all published in production. And so knowing that difference
Yeah.
is critically important. And honestly, it's probably one of the biggest challenges any CISO has or AppSec leader has, which is I ran static analysis on my repo. I found 15 problems or 100,000 secrets, whatever it is. Who owns this? And how do I drive a governance at a
Mhm.
business unit level? So that would be the first one. The second
Yeah.
one, and it's been stated before, is how do we validate that in that pipeline of development to production that we have integrated all of the tooling for identification and remediation as proactively and as holistically as possible. We are not in a waterfall model nowadays. It's agile. So developer direct engagement as well as speed is really, really critical, which means that you need to have a much lower false positive rate. So those are the key components that we put in. I think the third one is in that production state, do we really have a good understanding of the API services, the components, the full stack security? It's not just about the code, but it's about the full service in which is deployed. And I can
Mhm.
guarantee you, every time I've gone through and done an application security code review, you walk over to the developers and say, fantastic, show me your documentation so we can start this process. That is a full stop because nobody documents it. So how do we drive a holistic self-documentation, architectural diagrams, whatever? And these services are changing on a daily basis, so it needs to be relatively real time to drive that security review process on a human side. And
Yeah.
so full cloth, we really need to have a holistic security program put in place,
Mhm.
which is 80% of really, in my opinion, of what is needed. The last 20% are the snowflake, special scenario kind of things that we want to do. But I think basics matter here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's really understanding what's in production is a great segue
Yep.
into what we want to talk about in terms of AppSec visibility, right? And, you know, what I want to ask next is, for you, Roland, in your chapter, you spoke about understanding the complexity of value chains and pushing for more visibility. Can you touch a little bit on that in terms of visibility across AppSec?
Yeah, for sure. I think, we often have this concept that we're just looking at code and, we're protecting, whether it's static compiled, post, whatever we're doing in our specialty areas, but we're protecting a business, and to understand those end-to-end digital assets and service that are our business is really important. And it doesn't matter if it's, in any specific part of your organization, from, product development to marketing, sales, to revenue recognition, to customer support. All of that has some digital capabilities, and it's the underlying code that enables those digital assets or the interconnectivity of those. And often, sometimes, it's actually not even the services we're delivering, but connecting to. Think about the APIs and everything else that we code to develop to connect our digital ecosystem to others that provides the things that is our business. Um, we have to have good understanding and transparency of that. And Justin just keyed on this a minute ago when he's talking about the infrastructure in operations that actually enables the development, delivery, and trust services associated with that code, right? So we have to not only see it and understand it and have capabilities to defend all portions of it, but the infrastructure, the road under that drives our businesses to digital success. That's really the focus when I start talking about the value chain defense mechanism.
Yeah, yeah. One other thing that you kind of touched on, Roland, in the book was there was a story around visibility from a board meeting that you had. Can you share that story or and kind of what you learned during that kind
Yeah,
of moment in time?
yeah. I mean, it all gets back to the concept of you can protect what you can't see. If we're truly business operations protection specialists, that's what we
Sure.
do is protect these businesses. You can't do that. And it was like one of those younger in my career CISO embarrassing moments where I major problem in the industry. I go out and I'm briefing the board maybe a couple weeks, not even a month later, in general, and the issue pops up. I was prepared for it. We've been able to look for it, and we're doing this, and we're in good order. Um, and a very smart CTO that was on our board from a big high tech company said, "Roland, how do you know?" And I stopped. What do you mean? How do I know? How do you know you saw it all? How do you know? Can you see into every code repository? Do you know where they all are? Do you have access to every digital asset in the environment, even in the further parts of the world? And I had to stop, and I said, I'll get back to you on that. But it was an aha moment I'll never forget, and it's why I focus so much on visibility. The reality is that you can't be confident in the delivery of the capabilities that you're doing for your business unless you have that visibility.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great story. Um, James, you spoke a little bit about the danger of having a false comfort in thinking you have total visibility. Can you kind of unravel or unpack that for us?
Yeah, I think more and more security teams, especially in the age of like CNAP as the all-in-one acronym that's supposed to solve all of our problems, um, if you don't have a really in-depth understanding of your infrastructure and your deployment pipelines and your code base, you're going to end up implementing tools where you think you have total coverage and you don't. And I think that's what's going to create a lot of the gaps that exist out there. And so I think something just to be realistic about when a security person is evaluating a tool, the number of things that you're expecting them to evaluate in a very short, like less than a month period of time, like are they supposed to deploy every AWS service and check to make sure that the platform has support for every one of those services, every language that's used, every Docker framework that's used, every container deployment system that exists? Like it is a lot of stuff to try to cover if you're looking at a single vendor, especially like on that cloud security side. Like if the cloud is a data center, like you're really looking for an all-in-one data center kind of thing. And so the false comfort that creates is when a 0 day happens, like xzutils or something, like you end up searching in your tool that's supposed to be your source of truth for it, but that's when you find out like, oh, it missed this asset, or like you end up back at ground zero where you're like deploying manual scripts across your servers. You're like control effing manage giant code repos. Like the tool that you're supposed to be using for this stuff actually offers zero help when it comes time to actually use it, because you thought you had coverage and you didn't.
Yeah, yeah. And they're kind of touching or building on top of that. What role do you think ASPM offers in building visibility, would you say, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's the discussions I have constantly with people around like ASPM versus point solution is this idea that because it's a point solution, it's automatically better.
Hmm.
When in reality, a lot of the point solutions on the code security side are really created around very specific architectures and problems that tend to create these visibility gaps to where like this original ASOC marketplace that turned into ASPM early on existed uh, to solve this problem of like we have all these tools deployed in all these places, help us keep track or even figure out what's covered or not. And
Yeah,
what I appreciate about this newer wave of ASPM, like what Psycode's doing and some others, is like uh, we are actually giving you visibility into everything so that you at least have some kind of understanding of what's out there. And then it becomes a question of like what little gaps are left that maybe we need to fill. But it's an important step in like what Justin was saying around like treating code as assets and getting that complete place of visibility into your code. And you're getting some basic scanning capabilities along with it.
Yep. VJ, you've had a fairly mature ASPM journey. I think, it would be great to get your thoughts on what do you think the key components of a robust ASPM program are?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to this question. One is about the technology capabilities, but the other half of that I think is even more important, and that's really the overarching goals for your journey for this type of program. I think the goals should be to drive alignment to three outcomes. First should be your security program's quality efforts. The second is known risk reduction efforts, and then lastly, really in support of your business goals.
Mhm.
The ASPM journey, it's really, it's getting centralized governance, centralized visibility, automated controls, and not just automated controls, but controls that cleanly tie into existing development workflows.
Mhm.
Automated evidence creation for your controls efficacy to help with compliance efforts. But I think one of the most important outcomes here is not changing how developers work while you're driving towards these outcomes. That's really critical. Over 28 years, that's one of the most important things I've learned is when you start to change or you try to force change for how developers work, uh, that's like pushing sand uphill. On the features and functionality side, things like operating on premise and in the cloud, uh, centralized dashboard capabilities that are bringing all of the tooling data into one place, giving you that centralized oversight of your program, a risk relevance engine, helping you understand what assets and elements of your projects are most critical and why, allowing you to better make decisions around what you're going to be comfortable allowing and not allowing. That end-to-end visibility from cradle to grave, right? The developer who writes the code all the way to where is that code running in production. That really allows you to be able to customize your end user training programs. Helps you understand from a team perspective what teams need more training in these two or three OWASP top 10 categories versus these teams over here, which maybe need training in one specific area. I think software composition analysis is really important, SAS scanning, infrastructure as code, configurations, mistakes, secret scanning engine. I think probably the most important thing, though, to me, is automation of complex tasks, things like compliance attestations, being able to generate SBOMs, being able to automate evidence generation to simplify your audits. I think those are really the big things that go into that, that key component category and help really leverage building robust ASPM posture management programs.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you, VJ. And I think, ASPM, culturally should also allow you to bring more of an AppSec as a team sport philosophy. I kind of want to touch on that topic here next. And maybe I'm going to ask the entire panel here, right? So how do you kind of drive more of, you know, building a culture and practice of collaboration between security and development? Um, and maybe Helen, do you want to kind of kick us off here with that one?
Yeah, for sure. Everyone's motivated by whatever they're motivated by, and to be able to build a culture that has an outcome of secure development, it starts with understanding what everyone's motivations are and trying to find ways to align the security program to those motivations. So, if you're dealing with an engineering team and they're being told by leadership that they've got to be fast and they've got to get features out the door, then
Mhm.
okay, we can talk about security in terms of features. We can talk about security as a feature. You can get things aligned in that way. For me, it starts with understanding motivations and then aligning your programs and your language around commonality. Is going to get things started. There is always going to be disagreement. There's always going to be conflicting motivations. And that's the role of leadership, to try and unpick those things and smooth them out. That's where it starts for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
motivations, incentives, etc.
Mhm.
Do you feel
Yeah.
like you've been, sorry, Justin, I was just going to ask, do you feel like you've been successful at this collaboration over your career, Helen, or has it been kind of like a progression into
So
doing that?
I've worked in 3 different industries so far. So I've been working in security a really long time. But every vertical, every company that is big versus small versus regulated versus not versus US based, they're all coming at it from a different perspective, and it takes time. So I
Yeah.
made, newbie leadership errors in assuming that what worked in one place will work in another place. Boy, was I wrong on that one. And even within organizations, an engineering culture is different than a product culture, is different than a sales culture, is different than enterprise security culture. And so um, being a little bit of a chameleon has been one of those skills that I've had to learn over my career. And I'm getting better at it, but I still screw it up regularly.
Yeah.
Regularly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Environments have kind of changed depending on company to company, industry to industry.
Mhm.
Justin, would love to kind of hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I just kind of want to build off of what Helen spoke to, and I completely agree. In doing AppSec for 25 some odd years, actually 24 years, when I started at Schwab, actually. That's dating me. The things that I've learned is one, really around the culture. And the first thing is, especially back then, security people do not necessarily understand how to code, push, manage, operate a service. And we generally sit really far apart. And so the first thing, your AppSec team sitting next to or embedding them to some degree within the engineering teams helps to build the basic relationships and understanding. The second thing is motivation, to what Helen said, and understanding the 3 tiers of an engineering function: the executive, the product manager, and then the engineer. Most everybody wants to do the right thing, but again, to what Helen spoke to, they're going to be motivated by customer feature functionality and release trains and schedules. And so being able to have the second part is, no one wants to be told. Everybody wants to be part of the discussion, especially if it's going to impact them. And so the things that I have done, and I have not mastered this in spite of all the years, developing a governance model of when you create that AppSec program, doing it with the participation of those tiers is really a significant motivator in helping in implementing whatever outcome that is there. Especially when we pick out tools. If you're going to pick out a static, a dynamic, or whatever it is, having the engineers be part of that tool selection process is absolutely critical. In governance, tool selection, the list goes on, but it's really
Yeah.
engagement, learning about their environment, their motivators, their influencers, which gets a lot of credibility on the back end, and then be able to kind of drive whatever remediation actions, prioritizations that are needed. But yeah, that was my 2 cents.
No, I love that. Really bringing in development for the ride, whether it's for the tools, the processes, and so on. That's great.
Yeah.
Roland, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, Helen and Justin are bringing back nightmares of my learning experiences over the years, but I'll add a slightly different flavor into it because I want to bring it back to the ASPM discussion, some of the stuff that James and VJ were saying, because ASPM gives you this kind of intrinsic power of visibility. I'm going back to that visibility thing, but often you're dealing with, when trying to join engineering and security organizations for the common good of the business. You have the development community, you have the management layer, and then you have an executive layer, and they all, and really to Helen's point, they all have different wants, needs, and that you have to figure out in each industry and each business. But one thing that's really important is being able to see truth. And so when you have an ASPM platform and you can provide a scorecards that look at repos, business units, and say, here are quality problems, here are security quality problems, within our repos. This is simple facts. I'm not judging anyone. I'm not sending a bunch of risk findings or vulnerability findings you to go fix. This is just what our company looks like, and you're
Yeah.
responsible for it. I mean, there's an opportunity to provide them with the tools necessary to get ahead of being smacked upside the head because they weren't aware of continuing building problems within their groups, and being a partner and giving them the access to those tools and being able to set up ASPM capabilities to be able to do notification with executive dashboards that give them that valuable information that they can understand their business, which is development and engineering, in a way that they haven't been able to see transparently, and give them a little competitive edge when they see that a partner over in this area is 20 points ahead of them and in the green, and they're still in the yellow. So that competitive helps sometimes too, but giving them those tools is extremely powerful in relationship management.
Yeah, I love that, Roland. Yeah.
Yeah, when
Go for it, VJ. Yeah.
I was just going to say, when you can bring that level all the way down to the team and all the way down to the individuals on those teams, and you can have team level conversations around who's creating the most vulnerabilities in an organization, and then at the director and the senior director and the VP level, how are you measuring? That's a great motivator in terms of getting people's attention on the quality side of things, and being able to push the envelope with getting your bar raised significantly.
Yep. Um, Super excited to also have Tomas just join us in. Tomas, do you mind giving us a quick 30-second intro? What we're talking about here is how are you building a culture of collaboration between security and development teams? And quick 30-second intro, and would love to get your thoughts on that and your experiences there. I think you're on mute, or we don't have your audio. Um, Maybe James, you can give us your perspective while Tomas is figuring out his audio.
Yeah, I think fun. Oh, Tomas, you're good. You can go. I heard your audio kick in.
Okay. Hey, so CISO for the NFL. It's good to see you all. It's good to see some friends, Helen and Roland. Having, or is it Roland or is it Rolando? I don't know. Is it? I'm just messing with you,
It's
Roland.
Orlando today.
It's good to see you, Roland. It's good to see you, Helen, and nice to see you as well, VJ, Justin, and James. So Amir, again, as you mentioned, that sort of cultural aspect, I think it starts. So for me, it starts with a conversation, working with our development group to try to understand where they're trying to head to, and how can we inject security in that path so that they're thinking about security and doing security assessments and working through the sort of constructs of security in the same vein that they would be working through a new feature request, a new solution that they're trying to push forward to support the business. Like we're just another inject in or input in their path, and they should not be thinking about us as an obstacle. So if I'm able to work with those teams, help them understand how we're there to help, add value, contribute, make their code more secure and more efficient at the end of the day, so that we don't have to come back and fix things once we do find something, then I think we've done our job successfully and we've done our job well. So we do a lot of listening. We try to understand their process, their development process. We try to understand the tools that they're leveraging to create code and work through their sort of development process. And we're also trying to understand what development language they're actually creating their code in, so that we can then map and align our controls to work with those tools and those tool sets that they have. When we've been able to do that successfully, we've been able to identify an individual that will be that sort of champion or evangelist, if you will, that will work and partner with us to then work and speak the language of the developers and work with us, so that we can do it with less friction, with as less friction as possible. So that's what I see. That's what we usually strive for, and that's what I've been able to do in my prior experience, and what I've tried to carry forward here at the NFL.
Amazing, amazing, Tomas. So it sounds like listening really drives a lot of that collaboration between the two teams. Do you feel like motivations and incentives are also a piece of it? Have you had to try to do anything on the lines of providing incentives for developers to motivate them to work closely with security?
We do. So we try to inject things in like performance reviews so that they call it out that they're working with us so that their leaders can see that they're not only thinking about their solution, but they're thinking broadly around protecting the environment and protecting the company at large. We try to also incentivize them by not letting a good breach go to waste, right? So trying to understand what has troubled some of the other either peer groups or other folks in the industry, and how can we not have that happen to us and use that as a sort of motivator to say, look, we're able to, we've identified this was what actually impacted company X. We don't want that to happen to us, especially since we know it already is a known issue. So we try to use this sort of the good incentive, and then the I don't want to say fear factor, but the motivation around, you don't want to be that one developer that took what we
Yeah,
had to say for granted, and it caused us to have a breach of
yeah,
our information.
yeah. It's almost like a sense of accountability into the system there. Yeah, I love that. James, would love to hear your thoughts. Sorry for cutting you off earlier.
Oh no, it's all good. The uh, my typical advice here is that security teams should open a pull request before they try talking to developers, because honestly, it's just a sign of like you're going to learn a lot about the process just going through the steps of opening a pull request, and it helps build camaraderie instead of combativeness. I think one of the things that just every organization struggles with is like team infighting dynamics. And I'll use a non-security example just to help conceptualize it, where it's like sales blames marketing for lack of top of funnel, marketing blames product because the product sucks, product blames sales because they're not explaining the product well enough, and it creates this like cyclical like who's to blame um, for the bad sales performance. Security has the same issue where it's like the vulnerability counts keep going up. Well, it's because DevOps won't fix the pipeline. Oh, it's because the devs won't allocate the time and they don't know what they're doing. And then, oh no, it's because product won't give them the time. And so really it's about how do you like burst through that like toxic atmosphere that can get created.
Yeah,
And ultimately that comes down to everyone feeling like they're on the same team. Um, but that requires a lot of like both honest leadership top down, that creates the collaborative opportunities of in good organizations I've been a part of doing this. It's been everyone
mhm,
from like the compliance team is interacting with development to create like a risk profile based on what the developers are seeing, to like customer success being a part of it. And it really is this whole like it's the security team being embedded with DevOps so they know what's going on, this infrastructure being combined with DevOps and dev and planning together. Like it really is a cross organizational thing that to individuals at the practitioner level, it's about being willing to learn and get your hands dirty instead of just sitting back and being like, you're doing a bad job, you're doing a bad job. It's, I'm going to go in and try to fix something so that I can better understand and give you guidance of like what's going wrong here.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it's just, a sense of transparency at the leadership level. It's driving a blameless culture across the board. That's great. Um, Last question here, and I think this is for the entire panel. So, kind of looking into the future, what are you hopeful for in our industry? So maybe each one of us can take 30 seconds to kind of answer that one. Maybe we'll start with you, Roland.
Uh, wow, there's a lot. I only got 30 seconds, huh?
We'll give you
I'll
60.
stick on topic. Listen, I think if we can empower just-in-time defense through technology and platform technologies that give the power back to the people doing the job, and visibility to all parts of the ecosystem, really what James is talking about, which is
Mhm.
how do you empower people to do their jobs with the right information at the right time, educate them, move them forward, so our quality can continue to be great and continue to get better through joint interactions. And so my hope is that as AI starts to really push mountains of code, that we're able to not only keep up with tooling in our people, but we're able to use these platforms as well, to do just in time, to do better guardrails, and to provide better transparency from the developer up to the executives.
Awesome. Thanks, Roland. Justin, do you want to kick us off next?
Yeah, really two parts with 15 subsections. No, I'll try to be succinct. The first one, kind of, again, going to Roland's point, where in the modern stack that we have, technically, there's a huge amount of automation opportunities before us, from deployment to remediation, all the way. Not everything, but it's very, very different than what it was when we had our own colos with bare metal systems and the like. And so that is the first thing, is really excited about the ability to automate these core components of security in a really agile and expedient time frame. The second one is really the people, which has not changed. It used to be, actually, it was very difficult to convince people that security is important. That's not really the problem that we have. The problem that we have is, how do we feed security needs into the role and responsibility and prioritization stack of everybody else in the company? And so it's really invigorating to see a lot of leaders of the business saying, hey, I want to do the right thing, help me, help you, kind of aspect. And so, yeah, it's really encouraging as a result of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Um, VJ, do you want to take it next?
Yeah, yeah. I think, what am I most hopeful for? I think security has been really top of mind across the industry, and I think people are becoming much, much more conscious of it. I hear more executives talking about security. People seem to be prioritizing it. Really hope to see that continued journey, and people really making security a true part of quality, whether it be on the business side or the development side or the leadership side. I think that's the first thing. And I'll echo the sentiment around integrations, being able to tie technology together, being able to couple it together to help us do a better job. The continued proliferation of more partnerships, more capabilities to connect disparate systems together to make better use of information and intelligence and knowledge. I'm really hopeful that we'll continue to see that just expand and really proliferate further and further.
Awesome. Thanks, VJ. Helen, do you want to take us next?
Yeah. So my hope for the future actually is that we start to get engineering leadership to think in longer term than shorter term uh,
Mm,
uh, frames. We tend to, security has historically come from the bottom up, and that's great. But the bottom up is always about what is the problem I'm trying to solve today. And
mm,
we need to marry that. There's a place for that, but we need to marry that with some longer term thinking. I think some of the friction between security and development teams is that security is trying to solve tomorrow's problems more often. And the only time we get agreement is when there is some kind of security incident that has to be solved now. And that hurts. It hurts. And so I'm looking for leadership to be longer term. I think when you do that, I think all of these issues we've talked about tend to get less painful. So that's my hope for the future. Less
I love
pain.
that. I love that. Thanks. Tomas, do you want to?
Well, I don't know what I can add on top of what my colleagues have said. I would say I hope that AI can start to respond to emails and do my job for me, but that's probably too aspirational at this point. Look, I think there's a key component to what we do and as practitioners, and my real hope, genuine hope is that the businesses that we as practitioners are geared at protecting and supporting, that they fully appreciate the value that we bring to the table, and that they fully appreciate us as other business leaders to help them get to their objectives, right? What those objectives are: to launch a new product, to build more availability or capabilities in different regions where they may be underserved, or whether that's to provide to provide so that there's a continuous revenue. I really hope that our leaders, our business leaders, really appreciate the function And when they start to really appreciate the function, you'll start to see that more embedded across the organization. So that's my hope for the future. And I don't have anything else to add from what my colleagues just added. They're much more smarter than I am.
No, that was great. Thank you, Tomas. And then James, if you want to end us here.
Sure. I am usually I say I'm most excited that security people are learning Kubernetes, but what I mean by that is that cloud native architectures are really standardizing in a way that's exciting that allows these new generation of tools to come about. Because early on, like you couldn't determine how like a Java program was going to get compiled. So you had to like build this super nerdy thing, the scan a binary. But now that it's like standardizing around like Spring framework and different frameworks, like more broadly, and like the DevOps pipelines are also getting more standardized, like deployment tools, Kubernetes adoption. Cause like early on, like, should we support Docker Swarm or Kubernetes? Like, what's going to work? Like, it was very new and made this giant spread out of vendors that made it like really hard to tell what was going to happen. But I'm excited about this standardized like DevOps deployment cycles, CI/CD with Kubernetes for most production applications. The more and more that standard infrastructure gets adopted and deployed, it allows people to learn it and get skills on it, to have jobs around it, to build careers around it, which enables like the better security tooling for it. And so that's why I think we're at this point where I think there's never been a better time to get application security tools, cloud security tools, because you can really focus on a standard infrastructure as opposed to like, oh, it turns out these guys actually built a product that does this thing that's not really relevant to how we do cloud security.
Yeah.
So it's just the opportunities from that standardization.
Yeah. No, thanks, James. So I think that ends us here, and we're just about right at time. So, thank you to each and every one of you. I mean, it's so difficult to get all of you on a single call on a panel like this. So thank you times infinity. And if anybody in the audience would like to kind of connect and reach out to anybody on the panel, do so through LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about Scicode's ASPM, or if you want a copy of the book, please go to scicode.com. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and thank you to everyone. We'll see you guys later.